Let's find out what George Kontos thinks. George joining us right now on Willard and Dibs 95.7 The Game. Hey, man, how you doing? It's great to hear from you.
Fellas, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, appreciate you doing it. What do you think the Giants should do over the next 8 days? What's at the top of the list for you?
Well, first of all, I think they should take a deep breath and take a step back and realize that everything's going to be okay. This time of year gets a little bit quirky. You know, as the trade deadline approaches, these guys have been playing such good baseball, and then you kind of hit this little skid where you lose 6 straight. So what you want to try and do is keep your wits about you and really not lose focus. But I think an improvement to the starting rotation would be, I think, very welcomed. And first and foremost, getting some of these guys healthy, getting Tyro back, getting Brandon back. I know we've heard from Farhan talking about upgrading the middle infield a little bit just with the injuries and kind of lack of production up the middle lately. Before the St. Louis Cardinals have taken him off the board completely, I would have loved to have seen Nolan Arenado in a Giants uniform for how much of a Giants killer he's been his entire career. But I think that you definitely need a middle-of-the-order type bat, and you need an upgrade somewhere in the rotation.
You mentioned take a deep breath. How challenging is it considering what they just went through? 11 games on the road, 4 different cities, and they come back and they got to play a couple more days. How taxing is it to be on the road and have to play that many games in succession in that many different spots?
Yeah, that one's tough. I mean, when you're going on an 11-game road trip and having 11 games in 11 days, that one's a tough one with a wraparound in Detroit here on your last day before heading back west. You know, it can get taxing. I remember when we would go on those long road trips, those 10-dayers, the first 3-4 days, guys are super excited. You're in a new city. You get to go out to dinner, hang out with the guys. By the end of that road trip, guys just have a little bit of a temper and are ready to get back home because it's been a long week. But you know, we saw whenever you go west to east and you have those day games and you have a lot of things that you're just not accustomed to doing, it puts you in a little bit of a different routine. So I think that everybody on that plane heading back to San Francisco right now is very excited to be able to sleep in their own beds and come to Oracle Park tomorrow where they're very familiar and play a team that they know that they're very, very much expected to beat.
George Kontos with us here on Willard and Dibs 95.7 The Game. George, I'm going to say this with the utmost respect and hope for the future, but Casey Schmidt, this just is not working right now. I think he needs to be sent down and reboot this at a later date. What do you think?
You know, I think that Casey brings a lot to the table, and you know, he came to the big leagues, and his entrance at the major league level was just with such a firework, and he went off with such a bang. It was never going to be, reasonable for him to keep up that type of production. And everybody, regardless of who it is, goes through that little slump of when the league starts to make adjustments and gets to know you a little bit. And I think that part of Casey's struggle is his pitch strike zone discipline, what he's swinging at, which he seems to have gotten better at. I have to give him credit. He's not swinging at as much stuff out of the zone. But when you start getting into that little bit of a funk in that slump, you put a lot more pressure on yourself. And from a guy who's experiencing that first slump at the major league level, it's just going to take that one good game, that 2 for 3, that hitting a few balls hard to get him out of it. You know, am I ready to option him down now? Not quite, because who's going to come up and take his place and play shortstop while Brandon Crawford is out? So it's one of those things where the guy obviously is very talented. We've seen it. A little bit of it is in between the ears, and some of it is just kind of his growing pains at the major league level.
That said, when you head toward the trade deadline here in 8 days, is shortstop still a spot where the Giants need an upgrade?
Well, I think when Brandon Crawford comes back and he comes back healthy, there's nobody else that I would want at shortstop patrolling the infield. I mean, I think everybody, the whole field, infield and outfield, is better when Brandon Crawford is on the field. If he takes a little longer than expected, I think I'm going to trust Farhan when I hear him say comments like we're looking to upgrade the middle of the diamond. I think that's something that you might see them make a move for. You know, Tyro coming back is going to be huge. Brandon coming back is going to be huge. Getting Haniger back at some point, getting Brebbia back at some point. We have such important pieces that are on the IL right now that, you know, I could see them maybe sending Casey down and giving him a breather if they do acquire somebody for the middle infield at the deadline. But until then, I think that he's going to have to kind of strap it on every day and get himself ready to play and get out of this little funk.
George, especially since you pitched, I'd love to focus in on some of the struggling pitchers right now and what the Giants should and can do about it. Anthony DeSclafani, like right now it feels like banging the head against the wall. What do they do about this situation?
I'll tell you what, I think Disco is a lot closer than a lot of people think. The stuff has been there. I mean, his start back in Cincinnati, he was 95, 96 with his fastball, had some good bites on his slider. The stuff looked good. You know, he just gave up. He gave up a couple homers, and it accounted for 4 runs. But again, it's getting yourself back into a rhythm. When you spend some time on the IL and you get yourself back out and you get your routine back every 5th day, you know, it's one of those things that just takes a little bit of time, which unfortunately they don't have with the trade deadline approaching and the top of the NL West and wild card being as tight as it is. You know, the Dodgers, if you let the Dodgers run away with the NL West, they will absolutely do so. And then you have yourself in a wild card race, that becomes even more important. So you got to get kind of Disco, got to get him going. The stuff seems to be there. So, I mean, there's nothing really discouraging about the stuff. It's just those mistakes that he's making over the middle of the plate that are just seeming to be proving costly.
How encouraged are you by the outing from Ross Stripling today?
I'm very encouraged. I mean, back-to-back starts with 6 innings. He gave up 10 hits, managed to pitch out of some jams. You know, threw almost 90 pitches. To me, he's earned himself another start in the rotation. I mean, getting him, we were just talking about that confidence that these guys need and they get as they take the mound or they take their at-bats. He looks like he's going out there and he's pitching with a lot more confidence. I mean, 6 innings, 3 runs. I'll take that from him, from a guy who's in your 5th spot in the rotation.
George Kontos with us, Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. Okay, George, you mentioned starting rotation help. You mentioned middle infield. But we've been talking to listeners all day about whether the Giants should be a buyer, and if they are, to what level. What would you suggest? How aggressive, and you know, are you willing to pluck from the top 5 prospects, for example?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is where Farhan is really good at making these decisions. Farhan and company do a really good job of kind of doing their diligence on guys. I'm not giving away top guys for a rental. That's something that I, don't think it would be beneficial for the future of the organization. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where if you can get a guy back who's going to be under team control for a few years, I think that would make a lot more sense to give up some top guys for. But if you're going to give up top guys for just a rental, and a lot of people are like, sell the farm, get Shohei. I don't think that is a good idea, only because you have no guarantee that he is going to sign back. If you had that guarantee or you had some way to iron that out, and other than 2 months of let's see how you like San Francisco, I think that they're going to weigh out every trade. They're making phone calls right now. They're listening in on guys, but I would not be too aggressive. I mean, you're still in the hunt. We saw what happened from May 1st, May 15th, whatever date you want to go back to. These guys were the best team in baseball, or one of the top 2 best teams in baseball. And we're on a 6-game skid right now, but they can flip it around and win 10 in a row, and then they're back atop the NL West. They're not even looking at a wild card. So there's a lot of things that could play out in the next 7, 8, 9 days.
Is health the biggest thing you're looking at as the reason why they went from one of the best teams in baseball after May 1st to the team we've seen over the past week?
I think health is definitely one of the major contributing factors, but what we've seen over the last 6, 8 weeks of the Giants is they've been firing on all cylinders. Every facet of the game has been fantastic, which is why they've been the best team in the major leagues, or one of the best teams in the major leagues. The starting rotation was great. Logan Webb had been fantastic, and he still is. You could throw his outing yesterday out the window because he's allowed to have one of those outings, a bump in the road every now and again. So the rotation had been great. They'd been scoring runs. The bullpen is still pitching really, really well. Everything was firing on all cylinders. And then you kind of have a little bit of teetering where one thing's working, then another thing's not working. The last couple of games, nothing really seems to have been working, but it all kind of irons itself out. And when they're firing on all cylinders, this is a really difficult team to beat because you instill that momentum and that confidence and that clubhouse chemistry that plays a huge point and a huge part every single day when those guys walk into the clubhouse and get ready to go. So I think that the biggest thing is health, but they also have to figure out how to win ball games when everything isn't going at 100%. When the bullpen's off, got to score runs. If the starters, or if they're not scoring runs, the starters got to limit the damage and keep them in the game, give them a chance to win. And that is what's going to make a team that can go deep into the postseason, is figuring out how to win ball games when you're not playing at your very best on all facets of the game.
George, you think Verlander would be a good fit?
I mean, it's Justin Verlander. I would want him starting an important game for my team and for our team. So, yeah, I think Justin Verlander would be a good fit.
Who right now would be your rotation if you went into the postseason? Obviously, Logan Webb off the top. And which direction would you go from there? And would Disco be a part of your plans?
Yeah. I mean, Disco would be a part of the plan. Wow. I think in the starting rotation, though, again, that's where I think one of the places where you need to have 4 guys going into the bullpen or into the postseason. So you need to add somebody who has the ability to make those postseason starts, because I'm not comfortable with doing bullpen games in the playoffs in any capacity, and I think that you need more than 3 starters. And what I talked about on the postgame show just last week was there's a guy over there in St. Louis who's under team control, I think, for another couple of years, in Jordan Montgomery, who I've always liked, and I think he would be a guy who can handle the moment, he can eat innings, he can give you a chance to win. But I think the rotation right now, as it is, you need one more piece to fit behind. Yeah, DeSclafani would be in there. Alex Wood, when you get him back on track, Alex Wood is a guy who has major postseason experience. I think you got to get him a little bit deeper into games, but you need that one more guy, I think, that kind of puts you over the top.
George, I got one more middle infield thought. You're talking about Schmidt and getting Estrada and Crawford back. Is it too early to be thinking about Luciano? It's only been, I think, 5 or 6 games at AAA. They've gone pretty well. Is that an option?
For me, I think it's a little too early. I think that you need to give him his at-bats. He has to, he just got to AAA, and not saying that he couldn't come up to the big leagues and have a couple good weeks or even have some sustained success. But you want to have Luciano have his at-bats in AAA so he can get his feet under him and he can kind of see how the pace of a AAA game is, because when you jump basically from AA with only a few games to the big leagues, those other extra decks, those lights are brighter. Even though the game is the same game, there's a lot that goes into having the experience and the at-bats and the reps at AAA, because what you don't want to do is have him come up, struggle, and really, really do something bad to his confidence that'll take a long time to kind of get itself back to normal. You want to make sure that he's had ample at-bats. They say you usually want a couple hundred at-bats at each level before you start promoting. That's kind of the rule of thumb, or, at least what I've heard in the past. So if he's in AAA for another month and he's doing very, very well, I'd be a lot more comfortable bringing him up then as opposed to just right now.
George, great stuff, man. Thank you so much for doing it, and we appreciate you jumping on.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of the night.
All right, you too.
You too, George.
George Kontos on the Giants deadline situation.